Hello, welcome. I'm Ian Gallanar, your host and the founding artistic director of the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company in Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm delighted to have as my guest today Chris Edwards, who is the artistic director of Actors Shakespeare Project in Boston. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So Chris is an actor, director, fight choreographer, and educator. He's currently, as I said, the artistic director of Actors Shakespeare Project in Boston. Prior to ASP, he was the artistic director of Nevada Conservatory Theater in Las Vegas and the associate artistic director, director of education and apprentice training program with the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival in New York. As a director, some of his favorite shows include, here's a list: Equivocation, Pride and Prejudice, Othello, Romeo and Juliet, Three Musketeers, Around the World in 80 Days, Hamlet, Midsummer Night's Dream, A Winter's Tale, Water by the Spoonful, The Bombidity of Airs. Did I say that right? The Bombidity? Bombity of Airs, How to Break Venus. I almost read that as How to Break Venus and Furs. How to Break Venus and Furs, and Fences, to name a few. Chris has worked in London's West End, Off-Broadway, the National Theatre of Oslo in Norway, John Houseman's The Acting Company in New York City, HERE Art Centre, Dorset Theatre Festival, Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland, the Helix in Ireland, Chicago Shakespeare Theatre, Ubu Rep, the Flea Theatre, Cleveland Playhouse, Hip Hop Theatre Festival, Utah Shakespeare Festival, Soho Rep, Penumbra Theatre, the Guthrie Theatre, and last but not least, the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company. Well, you've been around, Chris.
Yeah, I've been around the block a few times.
Well,
I'm starting to feel it.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Anytime.
So I want to talk about Shakespeare and other stuff.
Great.
But the first question I want to ask you is, if you have an early memory of either performing or watching a performance that had a big impact on you in your life.
You know what? I have a few memories. I was never a Shakespeare fan, but I do remember in, what was it? No, my memory, I can't remember the year. I can't remember if it was 6th grade or 8th grade, sometime back then. But it was watching the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet, which, maybe many people of our generation had that experience. And I remember being intrigued and excited about the idea of Mercutio when he says, after he's been stabbed and he's, Tybalt is gone and he's talking to Romeo and he says, "Ask for me tomorrow and you shall find me a grave man." And I just thought it was, I think it was 6th grade. I thought it was so fun and interesting that he means two things in the moment. That he was punning, that he was dying, and that, he'd find him, if you ask him for him tomorrow, he'd be a very serious man. And you'd find him in a grave. I don't know. I just remember that being an interesting thing that kind of sparked my imagination around Shakespeare. So that was the first time that I had anything, to do with it. I remember talking in class about it, and I never talked in class about stuff. And I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me. And obviously it's stuck with me now for a good, 40 years. And I guess then the other one would be, I think, just generally speaking, working with young African-American men on Hamlet, and having one of the kids say, he was a kid who wasn't interested so much in Shakespeare, and a company we were working with him, and he, kind of was standoffish, wasn't participating. And then finally got around to looking at Hamlet and went home and came back the next day and said, "Hamlet was written for me." It said something to the effect that, "I am Hamlet. It was written for me." I don't know. I just found that also really moving and intriguing around Shakespeare.
Cool. So I want to connect the dots here a bit, but before I do it, I want to share with you my experience with that Zeffirelli film, which I think so many people had. By the way, where did you grow up, Chris?
I'm an Air Force brat, so I was all over the place. So I think I must have been in Las Vegas when I saw that. I spent a lot of time in Las Vegas as well. My dad retired there, but I was all over the world pretty much. Not all over the world, but a few places.
Yeah, I did. I had a different experience, but yeah, not all over the world, but all over the country. But in junior high school, I lived in a town called Indiana, Pennsylvania. It's a little college town in western Pennsylvania.
Uh,
And in ninth grade, they marched us all downtown to the downtown movie theater in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and they showed us the Zeffirelli movie. Um, and it was a very exciting experience for everybody. But they used to there's a brief spot of nudity in the film,
oh, yes, there is.
and at that moment they put a piece of paper in front of the projector so we wouldn't all be, infected with the sight of naked people
And
doing that. And we were all very upset about that because there were rumors about whether we would see some nudity or not.
they put the paper in front of the operator's booth in
Yep.
front of the
Yep.
projector.
Yep. Yeah. I'm sure some poor teachers, it was their responsibility to keep their minds unpolluted. Anyway, so that's you had this early experience, and then were you a theater generalist and then found Shakespeare?
You know what's funny? I was not in the theater at all when I was
Ah,
uh, through all the way through high school and up until my second semester, I believe, of my junior year of college,
mhm.
undergrad. I didn't even know the theater existed. Really, I mean, I guess I knew it, but I didn't. I never went to a school play. The first play that I saw that wasn't like, an assembly at school, like watching kids play leaves or teeth or whatever, was probably my junior year of college. I saw a play called Pip's Trip, which was Great Expectations, an adaptation of Great Expectations. Uh, I was in Peter Pan in sixth grade, or fifth grade or something,
Yeah.
but I went to I was a business major, and then I took an acting class and got hooked and figured I wanted to do it. But I thought I was really interested in going into film. And I got to graduate school, and obviously, the second year of grad school was all about Shakespeare. And even then, I was begrudgingly doing it. And then there's something that clicked that was like, well, I'm not the hugest fan of this right now, but I want to be able to do it and do it well, and then say I don't need to do it. And so I kind of buckled down and jumped in and became competent at it. And then I got the opportunity to work at the Guthrie with John Barton and Andrew Wade from the RSC. And something clicked working with Andrew, and it all sort of made sense to me based on one sentence that he said, which was, and I'm probably going to misquote it now, and I want to say he attributed it to Oscar Wilde, but I'm not sure. He said, the key to Shakespeare is, how do I know who I am unless I can say who I am? Because I'd always had a hang up about, why are these people, there's no subtext here. They just kind of say, and, I was a kid who wasn't really expressive, but it clicked with me, but it really clicked with me on the level of poetry and hip hop, because I found this way to tie my understanding of that world to it, because the master of ceremonies, the MC, holds the event down and says who he is and defines him or herself through language. I don't know, it just kind of all opened up for me. Then, I left, did a couple of Shakespeare's while I was there, and then I left and went to New York, and I just kept getting cast in it.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Constantly, So it became, it was thrust upon me, I guess, by fate.
That's interesting. I have a kind of a later conversion to Shakespeare story myself. It wasn't until I was in my 30s, and
Uh,
it wasn't hip hop or language. It was through comedy, uh,
hmm,
which I've told the story before. But it's there was a I, I, I felt useful. I felt like I could help because I saw that Kenneth Branagh, Much Ado, and the great Michael Keaton, Ben Elton, very funny people. They didn't get what was funny about it. And
right.
and I thought, you know what? I think I could crack that code. I think I could help. Um, so
Nice.
it's yeah. So whatever the entryway is, I mean, I think there's so many. I think different entryways to Shakespeare, um, and I think it's important for those of us who are sharing it with other people to to not close any of those entryways.
Yeah,
Not,
yeah. Do you feel like you cracked the code? Is that one of your strengths as a director, that you're good at doing the comedies?
Yep. Not necessarily the comedies, but I know I can figure out what I think is funny about something. That
Yeah.
except for the pancake and mustard speech in As You Like It, which I've got no idea how. But
Who does? Have you met anybody who does have
no,
a?
I've never seen. Somebody told me a story once about how it worked, and I was dubious. I was like, that sounds
Uh,
like one of those things where the audience goes, "Ha, ha, ha, I get it. I understand what that joke
yeah,
is here. Therefore, I'm laughing," rather than actually laughing because it's funny.
yeah,
Um, all right, so you were working as an actor.
yeah.
Were you an actor director, or did directing come later?
After I left grad school, I had started directing things before I went to grad school, but I would only direct stuff that was really important to me, because I felt like as an actor in New York, when your agent calls and says, "Hey, you have an audition for blah," and you may not want to do it, but you need to be seen by this casting director.
Hmm.
You kind of go do it. So I did some directing, and I would do it on the side, but it was only like very little special projects that I would do. Yes, I was an actor director, predominantly acting. And then when we had our daughter, I wanted to spend more time with my kid,
Hmm.
and started doing more directing because I'd only have to be there for, if I went out of town, I'd only have to be there half the time.
Right. And this was help me out. You were in New York, and
Hmm.
then I know you made your way out back, I guess, to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Was there were stops along the way?
Well, I was in New York for from gosh, 97 up till um, in the city, I guess, up till about 2009. Then we got rid of our sublets, and then I was upstate for a while. But pretty much around the time that I started directing, I started doing administration and doing education, and became education director, and did some consulting, and opened my own little company in New York that was like an education company. And then uh, became an administrator at Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, and did that for 14 years. And then from there, I went out to Las Vegas and became a professor at the university out there, and was the artistic director of the theater that was there, Nevada Conservatory Theater. It's connected to the university.
Yeah, and the reason I know a little bit about Las Vegas and you is because one of our company members at Chesapeake Shakespeare Company, Gerard Taylor, worked with you out in Las Vegas.
Oh yeah, Gerard was a student. He was one of the grad students when I was not teaching out there when Gerard was a student. I went out to guest direct him in a play, and so I knew him that way.
Well, we have that in common. I think he's an actor I've directed a number of times. I love working with him, and makes a great contribution to our company.
Oh, he's a great dude. He's
Yeah.
a great. Is he still there with you guys?
He is, yeah. He's on our staff. He's
Nice.
his title is director of the studio, which is our training and education, in-house training and education programming.
Very cool.
And he acts for us and all the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great.
Uh, he was for our audience listening to this conversation. He was our Mercutio in the Romeo and Juliet that got school matinees that got closed down at the start
Ah,
of the pandemic.
I see.
So Hudson Valley sounds like that's where you kind of made Shakespeare a more permanent part of your.
Yeah, that's where that was my artistic home, and where I really, you're doing, two to three of those a year for 14, 15 years plus, directing them in the education programs. I think I got my MFA or my master's degree in Shakespeare doing that there. It's amazing how much knowledge you learn just doing those plays over and over again. You do a couple of them a few times, and you really get the sense of what it is. It's hard to get the sense of the whole play one time through. Even as a director, I'm always feeling like I still can't figure out what this is. Like you said, I still don't know what the mustard and pancakes thing is about. You know, but yeah, that's really where I cut my teeth with a lot of Shakespeare.
Now I've been up to Hudson Valley as it's a sort of well, it's not outdoor because they perform in a tent, but they have
Yeah.
a view of the Hudson River and Hudson River Valley, which is quite on one side of the tent. So what describe that kind of work that they do, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, what we used to do, I mean, it's there's a new artistic director there now, so I haven't been there for a while and seen anything, but it used to be a very irreverent take on Shakespeare. Uh, some might call it quirky, oftentimes abstract. But we were really trying, I think, at the time to work on Shakespeare from a contemporary place or a modern place, and look at the language as I don't know, extension of who we were as people, and who the characters were. So we had a very contemporary sensibility about the delivery of the language. It wasn't that we weren't clear with the language or attuned to the rhythms of the language, but we didn't use any standard stage speech. We very seldom did things in Elizabethan dress. They were often modern, or as we used to like to call it, a post-apocalyptic world with no fossil fuels, except we all had rubber boots. So it was kind of an eclectic look at Shakespeare that was very celebratory of, I guess, Shakespeare and the actor. It was very actor-centric. We were in the tent with a view of the Hudson River and 30 to 40 yards of not meadow but lawn, overlooking West Point. It was gorgeous, and so we really focused on actors, relationship, and costumes. That was it. No set. There was even times when we would kind of joke if a new director came in, that, oh man, they need a crutch, they need a chair. We don't need a chair. We don't need no stinking chair to tell the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was really, really focused on language for us and relationship and what we wanted from each other as characters and the acting of it.
So and now you've landed as the artistic director of Actors Shakespeare Project, and the kind of work that company does, or your company does, is very unique, isn't it?
Well, what do you mean by unique?
Well, you're not. Well, why don't you tell me what you're? Maybe I'm mischaracterizing it, but
No. I mean, what is your take on unique? And I'll
well,
you know.
that you guys do you do site-specific performances. Is that correct?
Well, generally speaking, yes. I think that I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know that it's necessarily site specific in that in its history, we would do. The company's been around for 16 years. I've been there for about 3. But in the history, we would go into different spaces and really make them theaters. So on the one hand, it's not like going into a space and letting the space continue to be what it is.
I get it. I understand.
You know, but it's pretty close to that. I don't know what you would call that, but yeah, we would perform, and it's changed over the last 5 to 7 years. It's become a little more traditional into moving into theaters, but you know, we might do a play in a storefront. We might do a play in a garage. We might do a play at a church. So in that sense, there are particular sites, and the site then informs the work. But it's very rare that we do a completely site-specific piece, you know, where you go into a hospital and it is the hospital. Yeah, right. You know. But yeah, I think that's pretty unique. So I don't think you were too far off with that. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do here.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, you know, we spend a lot of our time defining community. You know, who and what is our community, are our communities. And I imagine that if you're moving about sometimes, that's important to your organization to be able to define your community. So what's your thoughts about that? Who is your community? Who are you serving?
Well, this is a great question, because we have several, obviously. There are always the community. Oh, I keep getting out of the shot. I'm sorry. There are, generally speaking, folks in Boston, in the metro area, who love Shakespeare. And that runs a gamut of, you know, race and socioeconomic existence. We have education programs as well that we work with students in schools across, again, a wide variety of socioeconomic status, wide variety of race. We also work with students, incarcerated youth, in the Department of Youth Services, and go into facilities and work with the kids there. And recently, in the last 3 years, we've extended some of our programming to include more programming around social justice, diversity, and equity in the stories that we tell, playwrights that we produce. So we're not only doing Shakespeare, but we're doing some new work with playwrights that are predominantly people of color. So we're broadening our community, but generally speaking, it's folks that are really in love and appreciative of Shakespeare. That's probably our biggest audience of subscribers. And we bounce around the whole city. So one of the things we try to do is, our offices are in Charlestown. We used to be in Somerville. We do shows in Cambridge, which is, you know, right near Harvard and MIT. So sort of a upper economic group of folks, a little more intellectual. We do stuff in Dorchester, in Roxbury, a little more blue collar areas. So we really have a broad range of communities that we try to reach out to or reach into, and it runs a gamut. It is hard, though, to do the community work when you're bouncing around. Because, you know, for one show we may be in Dorchester, and then the next show we're in Cambridge, and it's a whole completely different group of people that are coming to the show, or that we're reaching out to. So we try to remain steady with the education programs, and then our professional productions tend to bounce around a lot.
Got it. So why, the idea of this work with at-risk kids, or expanding beyond a traditional Shakespeare audience, why?
Well, I can't say why initially this happened. What the founder of the company and the first education program, why they decided to do it. I can only speak for why I think it's important.
Please.
And for me, it's not even so much about Shakespeare, to be honest with you. For me, it's really about expression. And the expression of language to define, going back to what I said, who you are, or what you're feeling, or what you need, or what your intention is. To me, when I look at a Shakespeare play, and I say something like Hamlet, who, most people know what that is, and you look at the language of Hamlet as a young person, and you're working with a young person, you say, hey, here's this problem, this puzzle, really, of language. What's the person saying? What is this person referencing? What does this person want? And it seems to me that if you can crack that code, if you can get in there and look at language and find a way to say, oh, he's saying that, but actually what he means is this. So if I understand the meaning, and that's the way I would say it, now I have at least two different ways to say it. And obviously with Shakespeare, there's 5 to 7 to 20 different ways of saying it. So if you can crack the code of that puzzle and understand that you can express yourself using different language, then I feel like as you move into the world, whether it be further in high school or in college, and you're faced with these other puzzles of language, whether it's the puzzle of language in a math class, the puzzle of language in politics, the puzzle of language in literature, right? That I feel like you're not going to find too many more puzzles that are harder than Shakespeare, and with as much possibility in the interpretation of the language. So I think what it does is it helps young people express themselves and say what they feel and say what they want and have ideas and debate, which I think inevitably makes them better citizens. And I actually think makes for a better democracy, because if everyone is saying what they want and speaking their truth and using the language to express, then at least we can get to the problems at hand, because everyone is communicating. So that's why I look at it. I'm not at the end of the day, I'm not a cheerleader for Shakespeare. Other than what the language allows. The infinite possibility of interpretation with the language is the thing that I find most interesting about it. And when a kid understands, like, wait, I can mean that when I say that, and you like tell them, you co-sign on that and say, yeah, you actually could mean that when you're saying that. I think that opens up a world of possibility for them in heightened language.
Yeah, I say sometimes I work with Shakespeare. My medium is Shakespeare, not because I love Shakespeare, but because he wrote some of the best plays. And but there are other good plays too,
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. As when I sometimes teach directing, and then from a director perspective, one of the things I look at when I'm directing a play is how the playwright is trying to tell the story. What are the things that the playwright has sort of written in or worked into the play to tell the story? And they basically come to 5 things, which is spectacle, theme, character, plot, and language, right? And some some playwrights only use a couple of those, like Beckett, right? There's no spectacle. There's no, if you take Waiting for Godot, for instance, there's no spectacle. There's no plot, no real plot. Like this causes this, which causes that, which causes that. It's like people sit around and wait. Somebody shows up, they leave. Nothing really happens, right? The characters are of a similar energy, right? So it's not like the difference between Lucky and Pozo. I can't remember the name. The characters. So the character isn't really telling the story. The plot isn't telling the story. The spectacle isn't telling the story. But the theme is really relevant. Mm-hmm. And the way that Beckett plays with language.
Yeah.
Right? And so those are the two major things that he's using, I think, to tell the story. Now, the other things are there to some extent. But Shakespeare uses everything. The plots are ridiculous and amazing. The characters are out of this world and amazing. The language is heightened and amazing. There's spectacle. There's huge scenes at court and fight scenes and big balls and dances. And then the last one is what was it? Plot language. I can't remember. Anyway, he uses them all. So that's another reason. Theme. Yeah, theme. The themes are amazing. From a director's place and an actor's place and an educator's place, it gives you some meat to work on, and stuff to sink your teeth into.
Well, since you brought up Beckett and we're sounding pretty intellectual here, I want to bring it down. We're kind of running to the end of it, and I want to do our lightning round.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Chris. So these are ridiculous questions. The only thing that's important is that you answer them quickly.
Okay.
All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Least favorite Shakespeare play?
Least favorite Shakespeare play? Oh, I'm going to say Time of Athens.
Ocean or mountains?
Ocean.
Sullied or solid?
Solid.
Godfather 3, yes or no?
No.
Right answer. That's the only one that has a correct answer.
No. What's his name is really good in The Godfather 3? Andy Garcia.
Oh, yeah. Yes, you're right. Yeah, correct on both of those. Most superfluous character in Shakespeare?
Most superfluous character in Shakespeare. Oh, Hymen, and As You Like It.
Hymen the Love God. Yeah, nice. Favorite word from Shakespeare?
Runyon.
Runyon. Okay, Kirk or Picard?
Picard.
And lastly, your favorite play, Shakespeare or not Shakespeare, it doesn't matter. What's your favorite?
Oh, my favorite play, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom by August Wilson.
Great. All right. Chris, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I do appreciate it, my friend.
Without a doubt. It's good to see you, man. Take care.
And stay safe up there in Boston.
You too.
All right.
Tell everybody I said hello.
I sure will.